Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, Mr. Ali. It's a Thursday, the 3rd of December, and you are joining the Real Story on ZMC TV network. So, as always, I hope you are keeping safe and warm. Before I introduce you today's guest, we are going to be talking about the impact of COVID on families. We're going to be discussing how the dynamics of the relationships between the husband and the wife or the partners has been impacted with COVID. How's the dynamics with the children? If you've got parents in care homes, how does that fare to you? We've also got now the predicament for those of us that are going to be celebrating or getting together over Christmas, which families and how many people are going to be part of that bubble. And we will be discussing that over the next half an hour. And as always, I share with you the current incidence of positive cases within Birmingham. And I must say the 4 weeks lockdown has been a relative success in the sense that a third of the cases have decreased now. So before there were roughly 360 per 100,000. It's come down to 260 per 100,000, but there's still a long way to go before we can safely say that we are in the clear. In terms of the lockdown that has finished, and we are now in our different tiers, 99% of the country are in the tiers, either tier 2 or tier 3. Here in the West Midlands, we find ourselves in the top tier, tier 3, which means that we are still restricted from visiting our family and friends in their homes or in their gardens. What that means is that there is the restriction that is placed still in terms of open mixing, social distancing is in place. Please continue to wear your face masks when you venture outside. But there's some good news. Non-essential shops have reopened. Barbers and beauty parlors have opened, which is a welcome relief for many of us. Gyms, again, another relief, has also reopened as of yesterday as well, and also places of worship as well. But that's not to say that we are complacent by any stretch of the imagination, not far from it, actually. And also, there's some further good news that yesterday, the Pfizer vaccine, which proved to be 94% effective, was bought over from Belgium and is in transit. So over the next few hours, it should be landing in the shores of the UK. So let me just tell you how we are faring in the different wards. Alam Rock over the last 6 weeks has by far the highest cases of 132 for the last 6 weeks, followed closely by Aston of 120 and then Sparkbrook by 113. But you'll be glad to know Alan Rock, Aston and Sparkbrook are showing a downward trend. So that's good to know. And let's continue to go on that downward trajectory. However, Handsworth Wood, which has 107 cases, but they are on the upward increase. So this is what we are saying in terms of continue to practice safe distancing. So on to today's topic, which is all about the impact of COVID on families. And today I have someone who specializes in terms of the family dynamics and the relationships, and also about domestic abuse as well. I have someone that I know very well, and someone that I have interviewed and discussed this topic previously, is none other than Miss Abda Khan. Very warm welcome to you to join me on digitally on the ZMC TV network. So as you can imagine now, the people are being furloughed, people are not working, their incomes have been reduced, they're spending a lot more time at home. That is, of course, going to have a negative impact on the dynamic and also on the family relationship. Abda, you someone who is an expert in this area, who's done a lot of research, who specializes in this particular arena. What are your thoughts about how COVID has impacted on families not only over the last 8-9 months, but more recently now, since the school children have gone back to school as well?
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me onto the show. It's lovely to see you again, albeit remotely. Yeah, I think we had a long discussion last time when I was with you, and we talked about that was COVID after that first lockdown, if you remember.
That's right.
And we talked about the effect that that first lockdown had had on families, and it was quite, quite devastating in a way because domestic violence increased. We've had an increase in things like use of food banks. We've had things like child poverty have increased. So there's been lots and lots of repercussions and people losing their jobs and livelihoods, struggling financially. And I think all of these things put pressure on the family unit. So domestic
Yeah.
violence is definitely something that has um, very much increased during this period of COVID, and I think that that situation is always quite difficult during the Christmas holidays anyway. But I think this Christmas, it might be that there's extra pressures as well with COVID. So I think we are not out of the woods yet because I know the vaccine's been approved, but I think it's going to take the best part of a year to get everybody vaccinated, I would imagine. So I
Easily,
think, yeah,
easily.
I think we have to make sure that we look out for people, that we look out for the signs that, somebody might be struggling and help where we can.
And absolutely, and there's been people who are arguing that when it was Eid, when it was Diwali, when it was Hanukkah, we weren't able to celebrate and spend time with our family and loved ones. Why
Mm,
has Boris Johnson made an exception for Christmas? And I suppose whether you are of a Christian background or not. This time of the year, around about 25th of December, is a time when most people are off on holidays, and it's a good time just to spend some quality time with your loved ones, whether you celebrate Christmas or not. And I suppose after the year that we've had, it is nice to actually come together as
mm,
families within the two bubbles that are permitted as well. So for me, I think for those people that are sort of have a, I'll try and make a point. I would say that do grasp this opportunity and
mm,
do spend some quality times with your parents that you may not have seen, with your siblings that you may not have seen or weren't able to get together over the last 8 9 months. Look on the positives. It's all about mindset as well. What are your thoughts about how Boris Johnson has curtailed lockdown and tried to be
mm.
the savior and the person that saved Christmas? Do you think the points I made are valid, or do you think that the points around Eid and Diwali were valid?
I think I think it's quite a complicated picture. I don't think it's very black and white or clear cut. So I think with Eid and Diwali, we would love to have had time off. I think that it would have been nice for the restrictions to have been lifted. But I think the problem is that we have been in a very fraught situation where COVID is concerned. And I guess I don't know what the
Yeah.
government's logic was in terms of not lifting those restrictions. But I think Christmas is a bit different in the sense that it's always a national holiday. So we don't have a national holiday for Eid, we don't have a national holiday for Hanukkah or for Diwali or Vaisakhi. So those are not normally national holidays. So I think on the basis that Christmas is normally a national holiday, I can kind of see the logic because most people who celebrate Christmas don't actually practice Christianity. So it's worth making that point that even the normal white population, most of them, although they might sort of recognize themselves as sort of Christian, a lot of them, but they don't really go
Yes.
to midnight mass or they don't go to church. So
No.
I think that that has been as a way of kind of keeping that sense of getting together in the Christmas holidays because we might not celebrate Christmas, but we definitely all get together every year and we enjoy that time off. We have national holiday, and I think that's really important to keep the spirits up. But I think
Most
I
definitely.
don't think I would ever want to be in Boris Johnson's shoes, to be honest with you, because who wants to close businesses? Who wants to restrict people's freedom of movement? And I honestly don't think that, despite the fact that they've made some mistakes, I don't think that they're doing this, any of these restrictions, willingly or happily. I think it's a very, very difficult decision that you always have to make, and I wouldn't like to make that
Most
decision.
definitely. And it's almost like damned if you do and damned if you don't. Really, there's no pleasing some people, and whatever side of the fence people are at, they are going to sort of complain and moan about how not fair and how difficult it is, and it is tough out there. I'm going to sort of touch on the financial pressures now as families. We do know, we've had big, redundancies being announced by the closure of Debenhams. We know the Arcadia Group, Top Man, the Dorothy Perkins and Burton groups, they've also weren't able to find a backup, and they've lost 13,500 jobs as well. The timing is just awful. And in one way, what I would say is that these employees were on furlough all this time, and the bosses and the CEO of these companies were able to take full advantage of the furlough. Just before Christmas, they've announced now that they aren't going to continue. They're going to be bankrupt. The timing is just awful now, with the pressures of buying presents, everything getting so expensive. The financial pressure are very tough for the families, isn't it? How do you buy all the presents and do the Christmas preparations with the turkey? At the same time, you still have to pay your bills, your mortgages. It's a real tough time for families, and that has a real negative impact on the relationships between the husband and the wife, between the son and the parents, and so on. Really. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts about the financial pressure the families are under?
Yeah, I was really sad to hear that Debenhams has closed down. I thought it's just another, department store that I grew up with that has now closed, because there used to be C&A and Woolworths, BHS, and now Debenhams has gone as well. And obviously, I think it looks like the Arcadia group of department stores are going to go as well. So that's going to leave a massive hole in our high streets, in our town centres, because if you walk into any kind of town centre, all of these shops are present there. So that's devastating in itself. The human cost of that is obviously families are going to be struggling right before Christmas. And I think food banks are really going to come into play, I think, this Christmas. Absolutely. And just as much charitable work that can be done. And I know a lot of charities are doing a lot of great work. But I think the problem is, because of COVID, it's logistically difficult this year. It's not like a normal year where there are no restrictions in freedom of movement or having contact with people. So I think it's time for everybody to rein it in a bit. To be honest with you, I think those of us that do have, let's try and think about those who aren't so fortunate, and let's maybe not be as extravagant as we would normally be. And I think it is important that even if we're meeting at Christmas, because you're allowed three bubble families are allowed to group together, still be really wary about not being somebody who might be asymptomatic and then pass the infection on to elderly people in the family. So I think it's important that we try and maintain that social distancing, because we don't know when our elderly members of our family or vulnerable people are eventually going to get the vaccine. And having had COVID, it was a terrible experience, and it really made me think about life a lot, and it made me think about what's important. And I know people who've lost loved ones, who've lost multiple family members. So, sometimes people haven't been touched by COVID or affected by it. They think that it's a bit of a hoax or it's not real, but it's very real for some people who are absolutely devastated having lost family members. So you've got multiple problems going on in society right now. I think it's a really complex picture. I don't think we've ever known anything like this, where we've got a recession coming, possibly a depression coming. We've got economic situations getting really bad. We've got a lot of domestic problems, things like domestic violence around the industry. There's a lot of aggression in society as well. I feel at the moment people are very aggressive because we've had lockdown and people are losing jobs and incomes are declining. So I think it's time for those of us who can help in a constructive way to do that, and try and be mindful that some people are really going through very difficult times because of COVID. Absolutely. And try and put that in the back of your mind and act accordingly.
Thank you, Abda. I sincerely agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, even today, I lost one of my colleague, my university friends, who's only 45.
Oh, sorry to
He
hear that.
passed away today, and only a couple of days ago, he buried his father. And for him to sort of pass away so soon, very, very bad. And at the same time, his mother is also in hospital with COVID. So, for those people that, are poo-pooing or not, believing this to be a real virus and a real disease, then I think, ask these families, people that have suffered COVID like yourself, ask them, if this is real or not. And I'm going to sort of just touch on also the food bank that you mentioned as well. There are record figures that are now people that are on universal credit that are applying for benefits. And for a lot of people out there, they've never claimed benefit. It's a real, embarrassment sometimes. It's a dent on their pride that they have to go to, the unemployment benefit and apply. A lot of the times they're not familiar with the paperwork and what needs to be done, especially now when we are in the age of digital. So on top of that pressure, they are also then having to utilize and supplement their fridge and their cupboards with food banks as well. And we know that they're playing vital services to pick on those people that have gone and fallen through the net. But it's not their fault. It's not people that are relying on the food banks. It's not their fault, and and that whole taboo should be really removed from people. The ones that are mean tested and really are eligible, they should be encouraged, and they should be. It's just unfortunately, in this day and age, it's a reality of the situation that we find ourselves in about the food. So it is tough out there, but again, that has impact on the relationships and the dynamic of families, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, and I think you've got to remember that I think we place stigmas on certain things, don't we? So we attach stigmas to asking for help, generally because the person is made to feel like a failure. They're not a failure. It's
Yeah.
just your circumstances. It can happen to absolutely anybody, and sometimes you have to get outside help, and we should never make that person feel like they have failed in any way. And I'm not talking just about going to the food bank. I'm talking about, say, domestic violence victims. Sometimes they don't get help because, again, stigma. It's a taboo thing what people think. You shouldn't, air your dirty linen in public. People shouldn't, close on people's doors, just sit behind those doors. But no, I think we need to remove those, you know, perceptions of shame or low self-esteem just because somebody's seeking help. Because I think it should be made to feel more normal, and we should feel that people should be able to get help. And these stigmas need to be removed. Really, and it does affect relationships. I think sometimes the man feels that if he's not providing for his family, he feels he's let them down. Sometimes it's like you can't get your children new things or presents for Christmas or whatever it might be. So I think, yeah, food banks have like completely had to really rise to the challenge with this COVID this year, because I don't think anybody's anything like this. So I think it is the time for communities to come together. People say we're all in this together, but I don't think we are. People always say, "Oh, we're in the same boat. We're all in this together," but we're not. Because I'm in a much better place than somebody else who's perhaps, for any reasons. It could be the fact that they've lost their job. It could be the fact that they're suffering domestic abuse. It could be the fact that they are not technically savvy. They can't. They don't know how to operate gadgets. So they're isolated and lonely. And actually, mental health is another big issue
Absolutely.
as a result of this COVID, because people's mental health has really suffered.
Most definitely. And you talked about, anything that is a transition or a change has a real impact on people, because I know, we are a real stickler for change, and, people who've been in a particular speciality or a sector, if they have to, retrain or, learn new skills, it can be a real stress. And sometimes people aren't able to cope, and inevitably, whether I know as blokes we tend to sort of internalize, and we're not very good at verbalizing our feelings, and sometimes you do need a release. Otherwise, a bit like a kettle sort of boiling. When it does come out, it comes out
Yeah.
in a very negative way, in a very a disruptive way, and that can have all sorts of consequences. I was speaking to an inspector a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying a quarter of all their cases that they are dealing with since April, since the start of COVID, are of domestic abuse. So not necessarily just what we think about domestic abuse with the husband or the male partner, maybe whether it's emotional, whether it's psychological, whether it's financial or physical, taking the advantage of their female partner. What he's also seeing is the children abusing the grandparents, the siblings maybe sort of fighting. So that's all termed as domestic abuse. And we also know that at the moment, the ones that are really sort of passing on the virus are young people. If you tell them to stay at home, they won't listen. And then when they do come home, those people that are suffering from diabetes, long-term conditions, are elderly, frail, they will suffer the brunt of getting the virus from their young next of kin.
Well, this is the problem, I think, because the BME community has definitely, the ethnic minority and Asian community has definitely suffered, and Black community more than the rest of the population, because we tend to live in extended families. We tend to have multi-generational families living in one household. And then what
Yeah.
happens with that is that, like you say, if the youngsters don't abide by the rules around social distancing and the washing and the using of the hand gels and things like that, if they don't abide by that, then they might asymptomatically pass it on to grandparents. And I think then that's the danger, because once it gets in the family and you've got multi-generational family, and it can spread to other members of the family. And that's why it's been so devastating for our community, actually, because of our family structure. And I do feel that maybe, I think some mosques have been doing a really good job. I've seen on social media as well that some of the mosques are really tried this challenge, but I think they can still do more. And I think that it's time for our imams to step up and make sure that they try and help to remove some of these stigmas and taboos, so that people will reach out to imams to get help, because I think that's part of the role of an imam in a mosque, is to be there for his congregation, to be there when people encounter difficulty, so that people feel like it's an open door policy, that they can actually go and get help from somebody that they feel is in a position of trust, who can reach out to, because not everybody's comfortable perhaps going to food banks, or maybe everybody doesn't have those communication skills. So I think the mosque can play a vital role, especially with our elderly people, as a route to getting further help.
Most definitely, Abda. And what I must say is, if we can just sort of maybe, focus a conversation around the South Asian community. We're talking about the Sri Lankans, the Bengalis, the Pakistanis, and the Indians. We're very good at masking and keeping these things within our household. We use the word izzat, which is respect, family respect, standing within our community to sort of keep a lid on things. I like to think myself as someone who's a community leader, who's got a good my tentacles are all over, and I must say, hand on heart, I've not heard of any cases. It's very little subject that's been sort of talked about openly. But when you then speak to the people that like yourselves, who are in this field, like the inspector, it's a real worry for them. But but as someone who's in the community, we hardly hear, or we don't sort of get to pick up these things. So it's a tough one, isn't it? When you're saying, and again, when I've had these conversations with imams and mosques, they're saying, drugs, crime, these are the issues that are affecting us. Domestic crime, not in our community, not in Island Rock, not in Small East, not in Aston.
That is a problem, because essentially our communities are very patriarchal. So our communities, South Asian communities, are generally speaking run by men. You know, the hierarchy is such that it's very patriarchal. It's not matriarchal.
Yeah.
And what happens is, you know, a lot of the times I don't feel as though women think that they can approach elders or other people in the community because these things are so taboo. I've said this for a while. I think until people like imams start talking openly in khutbahs after Friday prayers and things like that, until they actually start speaking about something like domestic violence regularly, I think we're not going to be able to break down these barriers and taboos. Because at the moment, it's really difficult for women from that community to get help from within their community, and that's why you don't hear about it, and that's why I hear about it. I might be on a domestic violence helpline where they're ringing anonymously and they're getting the help that they need. It's heartbreaking. It's truly heartbreaking because there's been times when women do reach out and they don't get the support that they need. They do not get the
Yeah.
support because people will say, "Oh, just have sabr. You'll get better. It will get better." Or, you know, just take it because, you know, a girl goes to a bride goes to her husband's house and then her funeral leaves, and, you know, you have to stick with it. You know, but that's, you know, they conflate religion with old cultural
Culture.
sentiment, you know, and it's very different. Like it's the two are not the same. Islam does not condone domestic violence. Islam does not condone any kind of violence,
Absolutely.
in fact. And in fact, you know, the Prophet, peace be upon him's last sermon actually spoke about being good to your wives. And I always say that if you want to follow in the footsteps of the Prophet, peace be upon him, then perhaps you should do some of the things he used to do. He used to mend his own shoes, he used to help with household chores, he used to help with the cooking. He would regularly help with things that needed doing around the house. So I don't think that if he was humble enough to do these things, then this is not being taught to our young men. This is not. We need to get the next generation. You know, perhaps
Absolutely.
it might be too difficult to change the mindset of our elderly generation. But I feel as though the middle-aged and the younger generation, you know, definitely, I think they don't know these stories. They don't know these hadiths. They don't know these, you know, the good side of the religion. You know, the one that preaches peace and tolerance, and also being equality is a very big important part of our religion. You know, if you look at Khadija, who was the first wife of the Prophet, peace be upon him, she was a businesswoman. She was far richer, she had a greater status than the Prophet, peace be upon him. She was much older than him when they married, and again, these are all taboo in our community. If a woman is ambitious and successful, it's not considered a good thing. Yet she was. If a woman marries a man that's younger than her, again, that's not considered a good thing. Yet that's exactly what happened with the Prophet, peace be upon him. And, you know, marrying divorcees with children again, or widows, it's not considered a good thing in our communities. And yet that's something that was practiced by the Prophet, peace be upon him. And in fact, you know, it's not a case of a man has to have 4 wives. I think those exceptions were made in that time because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted people to realize that actually I'm setting you an example that it's good to marry a
Absolutely.
woman who's been who's been widowed or who's divorced and has children. It's good for a man to take on his responsibilities because Islamically that's a good thing to do. So I think sometimes I know some really good imams. I have to say, I'm not trying to paint every imam in the same brush with the same brush, but
Sure.
I think more can still be done, you know. And I think when you've got that congregation after Friday prayers, it's a great opportunity to actually get these messages out. Slowly, we have to change the mindsets within our communities so that people who are suffering can get the help they need.
Most definitely, and I think mosques and community centres are playing more and more pivotal role.
Yeah.
A lot of food banks have been started since COVID has started, and that's just one sign that they are changing to the times. And also, I think it wouldn't be fair if we also don't mention that it's not just one way. Men are also abused. I think about a quarter of
Yes.
cases it's the other way around, where the woman will also use financial, emotional, maybe even physical abuse on the male partner. So it's not all just one streak as well. And again,
Absolutely.
we need
Yeah.
to encourage. We need to also encourage the male partner or the husband to also step up and seek support. There's nothing embarrassing or ashamed of
No.
seeking support and trying to, come to a amicable resolution, if that's okay. There was a couple of messages on Facebook where people were just acknowledging and thanking you for taking time out to highlight this very important issue, and someone who's got a wealth of experience and direct experience in handling these cases day in day out as well. So and also the fact that even whoever comes and complains of this isn't going to do it lightly, because there's a good chance that she may have to leave the family home. Obviously, then you're on benefits, and it's not easy out there, with all the pressures. So I think whoever
It's
does
really
do
not.
it.
It's really not. I can give you an example of a woman that I worked with, and she left her husband a couple of times. She used to get severely beaten, and she left. But then she went back because she couldn't survive financially and economically. But then when she last left for the last time, she was put into it's like one of those B&Bs on Hagley Road, not a very nice area, and she was put on the fourth floor. She had three children under three, and she was living in a one-bedroom place, just one room with like cockroaches and mice. And every time she needed to prepare food, she had to go all the way down the stairs. There was no lift, with all three children, prepare their milk or their food, go all the way back up. So she lived like this for nearly a year. She said, I nearly gave up. She said, I nearly went back to my husband. She said, I thought it would have been better to be beaten up every day than to let my children down like this. She felt like she was letting her children down. She goes, I cannot believe how I got through it. But then a support worker helped her. A lot of times it's health visitors and support workers, that actually are able to lead to something better for these women. So she then went into refuge, and she was much happier.
Yeah, no, no,
But
most
it just
definitely,
shows
most
that
definitely.
she didn't feel like she could reach out to anybody in her community. How sad is that?
No, no, absolutely. I'm going to move the conversation. You mentioned children now, and there's one person I must congratulate over the last few months is Marcus Rashford. I don't know if you are familiar with the
Yes, yeah.
footballer who's really championed the cause of providing free school meals for the needy families during half term and school holidays, because during the term time, at least the children get one decent or hot meal throughout the day, and that's not necessarily the case when they're on holidays. And he's really championed that, and the government have done a series of U-turns and has met his needs. At the moment, it is the children that suffer when things go a bit pear-shaped, with not being fed, not being clothed, being ignored, neglected, because the parents or the guardian are busy dealing with their own stresses and trying to make ends meet, and worry about themselves. So is there any sort of stories about children? How are they suffering and how are they coping during COVID?
Well, I think you're right. Some children, sadly, don't get a hot meal when they're at home, and that's just heartbreaking, isn't it? The fact that, and some children go to school on an empty stomach as well. So some children go to school, they've not had any breakfast, and if their parents don't give them a snack, they don't have a snack. So then they have to wait till lunchtime to eat a proper meal, a hot meal. So
Sure.
sadly, for some children, that's the only like hot meal they get sometimes as well. So it's a really important meal for those children that is. But I think it's been really tough on children, especially with domestic violence on the increase. 5 women a week were killed during lockdown. Um,
Wow.
5 women a week were killed by their partner or ex-partner. It's usually 2 women a week in this country. That's shocking enough, isn't it? Shocking that 2 women every week in this country are killed. But during this pandemic, it's been 5 women a week. 5 women whose children are motherless. So for children it's really difficult. Number one, their nutritional needs are not being met. Number two, they might be in the middle of a bit of a war zone if there is domestic abuse going on in the house. And because of lockdown and because there's no recreation for the children, it's very difficult, isn't it? I, you know I know with my kids we used to love going to the cinema and things like that, or just going out for a meal or whatever it might be. And with all those opportunities gone, I think it's really difficult. I worry for their mental health, actually. I think that what they were saying was that calls to Childline have increased. They're saying record referrals for mental health issues for children. So I think this pandemic has had a really damaging effect on everybody's mental health, but particularly children, because I think they've got it very tough where they're in a very vulnerable situation.
Absolutely, and the fact that the schools have restarted and it's been start and stop, stop and start, that hasn't helped matters as well, especially for those kids that maybe doing their SATs or are in year 10 and 11 or doing the A levels or at university. They just don't know where they are at the moment, and that can be a real cause of stress. And I know young people have all sorts of other pressures, social media pressures as well. You have the growing up pressures, and that's the last thing that I need. We're now coming to the end of the show, Abda, but I'm going to ask you to just to maybe sort of give your final concluding remarks on the matter, please.
Well, what I might do actually is I might have it here. I was gonna read a little poem I'd written for another event.
Please.
If I've got it. Last time I did read you a poem, didn't let me just
Yes, you did.
grab it if that's okay. Yeah. So what I was doing another talk. I've been doing lots of talks on Zoom actually. So I did another talk, and it was just about COVID and how we've all become a bit resilient because of COVID and whatnot. So I did this poem called Hope. So I was just
Oh,
gonna
wow.
read that to you if that's okay. If we've got 1 minute, I should have done this beforehand, shouldn't
No,
I?
please do so. Yeah,
Let's have a look. Here
no,
we
please
are.
do so.
Right, here we go. So yeah, it's let's have a look. Here we are. Okay. So yeah, so this is the final message I'd like to leave with you, that there's always hope. Like however bad things get, I think we should always cling on to hope, because that's what really matters. So this poem is called Hope. Hope is the tenderness of morning dew on blades of grass and petals of soft hues. Hope is the dawning of a sun-kissed blue sky after the torrential rain has swept by. Hope is the joy a mother will savour when she holds her baby after the pain of labour. Hope is overcoming the fear of an affliction when the doctor's findings are gently spoken. Hope is a feeling of not feeling alone when your neighbour checks in on you on his way home. Hope is the joy that touches your soul when a stranger smiles at you for no reason at all. Hope is the feeling of a loved one's embrace that warms your heart on the coldest of days. Hope is the angel that will sit by your side and in your darkest hour lead you to the light. If you feel hope and a sense of belief, then pass it on to every person you meet. For though we are different in colours and faiths, we are all God's children as one human race.
Wow, that was a poem by Abda Khan on hope. And my concluding message is that it's only by together. It is a testing time for all of us. Hopefully, we are seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Let's stick together, and through a unifying force, through hope, we will be able to come through the other side, hopefully a lot more resilient, a lot more better, and we'll be better for it at the end. So, on behalf of myself and ZMC TV Network, keep up doing the fantastic work that you are doing, supporting the families out there during these testing times. And if there's anything that me or ZMC TV can do, please, we're only a phone call away. On that note, thank you for tuning. Hope you found some of the anecdotes and the stories from Abda Khan, who specializes in domestic violence, on the relationships and the dynamics of families during COVID, useful. And my final message is, again, just to keep together, stick together, work as a unit, work as a family in order for us to get through these difficult times. Until next week, please look after yourselves and each other. God bless.